So a soccer mom somewhere donated a complete in box Little Samson to Goodwill. The internet has exploded. No, for reals this time. You think I'm on bath salts. I'm just on pixie sticks. It's neither here nor there. We're going to talk all about it this week on It's All Dug in Games. One of the most, perhaps arguably the most hyped title in the NES library outside of maybe stadium events, that's a whole different subject for a whole nother day, is Little Samson. It was a somewhat obscure game that came out very late in the NES life cycle. And over the years, over the decades maybe, it's becomes this larger-than-life mythical creature, like the subject of endless internet hype. And this game that admittedly had a very low print run has skyrocketed in value and is worth a small fortune. It seems to be the prize, the bragging rights, the status symbol, as it were, for any NES collector. And that's all interesting because while I can tell you, as someone who's been hunting Nintendo cartridges, tender tapes, as I like to call them, for decades, I will confess I've only ever seen a complete in box Little Samson at conventions. Never seen one in the wild at a yard sale, an estate sale, a pawn shop, flea market, you name it. So it's interesting to me that we saw emerge in the last day or so an auction on shopgoodwill.com. And for those who aren't quite versed in this, let me just set the table a little bit. If you wondered why in the last few years you never see good video games, I'm not talking like Xbox 360 sports games or things of that nature, but good video games at your Goodwill, it's because most Goodwills will now take video games that they see and identify as having value and send them to this auction site, shopgoodwill.com, which is sort of like an eBay for Goodwill donations. And again, what happened here was an auction came up from a Western New York Goodwill of 18 Nintendo NES games. The title of the auction is RoboCop, Tom and Jerry, Samson, Yoshi's Cookie, Mario. And as soon as one lays their beady little eyes on the first photograph, you can see that there's what looks like 9 boxed games and 9 loose games, the least of which, of course, is an actual boxed Little Samson right there. So it's an interesting dynamic because while most people have never seen a boxed Little Samson in the wild, that doesn't mean that they're not out there. And somewhere, someone had a box Little Samson and a bunch of these other mostly late NES games sitting around and decided that they were just going to donate them to Goodwill. So it puts the lie to some things. Everyone likes to think that any copy of Little Samson out there is going to never be potentially a deal because even my grandma's going to look it up and realize that, oh, well, I mean, Little Samson, it's worth $5,000, right? Obviously, that's not the case. So those few stray copies that are still floating around there in attics and basements are actually still to be found. But let's not get sidetracked on making this a pep talk or an inspirational speech. Let's get into the meat and potatoes of this auction, which I think is so compelling. So here's what had to have happened for us to get to this point. Obviously, someone found a box of Little Samson and these other games, put them in a bin, brought them to Goodwill, and donated them. Now, for them to have gotten here to Shop Goodwill, and again, I am not saying that there's any kind of widespread impropriety in Goodwill or any of the thrifting, but the person who received that donation had to be honest enough to not just abscond with it, categorize it, identify it as having value, and the whole custody of this game had to all get to the shopgoodwill.com headquarters. Again, not at any point be absconded with or otherwise any fancy business, photographed and placed on this auction for people to bid. So I will say, you know what? It almost kind of makes me feel good about the world that there were probably a dozen people that had their mitts on this thing between the time that someone donated it and the time that it's here, and everyone apparently has been honest about it. But what else is intriguing to me about this is if you look, for example, at price charting. Now, I know we just did a video about price charting and talking about how it's not the final answer in terms of, valuations. It's at least a good start and an idea for average. So I went ahead and I did a lot value calculator for the 18 titles that were listed here, of which half were I'm calling them complete in box. We don't actually know if the manuals are there with these, or for that matter, if the correct cartridges are in the boxes. That's an important point I'll get deeper into in a bit. But let's just presume that as that picture is laid out, that you're actually getting 9 complete in box games and 9 loose games, and that they all actually have the correct books and cartridges with them. This would mean that according to price charting, the average value of this lot is $5,133.42. Now, this is compelling to me because as far as I can tell, this auction, at the time I'm recording this, has only been live for about a day and a half, with 6 days and 6 hours left in this auction. The current bid price is already at $3,000, with 25 bidders throwing their proverbial hat in the ring on this. And this is where I find this, it just with so many questions, right? So many questions. Is the hype for Little Samson so hot that it takes over and overrides people's common sense? And here's what I mean by that. Just like what we talked about with the price charting video that we did not too long ago, in how important condition is when you look at value. From the photographs that we have and the information in this auction, no one has tested anything here. I don't think anyone's really gone through and validated that the cartridges are the right games. They just took pictures of these boxes, and that's it. For all we know, the boxes might even be empty. There is no warranty. There's no photographic evidence of anything other than you're seeing the front part of a box for these 9 games. And granted, the condition doesn't look terrible, doesn't look great either. They all seem to have this kind of masking tape over the tops of them, maybe to close them up. I'm not sure. But I mean, questions for me in terms of again, I admit I'm more of a picky Nintendo complete in box collector, but I'd want to know what are the condition of the box flaps? What does the back of the box look like? Is there crushing on the sides? Is there writing? Are there stickers? Was this from a rental store? Is the right game even in there at all? Is it authentic? Does the cartridge look like trash? Is the label no good? Is the little Billy Smith's name and marker on it? How about that manual? Is it there at all? Is it torn apart? Is the cover ripped off? Is there writing in it? Did someone use it to store their drugs? Who knows? All these things are complete question boxes. And the reason I'm rattling all these off in talking about that is someone out there is willing to pay virtually sight unseen over half of the price charting average value for this lot. And again, with 6 days and 6 hours left, I strongly suspect that people's emotions are going to get the best of them, and someone is going to take a $5,000 or more gamble to pay full price, if not more, for this lot, for the hopes that maybe they can have the bragging rights that they scored the Goodwill Little Samson and that perhaps there's actually something there. What's going to happen if the winning bidder gets sent this lot as pictured, but they open up that Little Samson box and it's a copy of Top Gun? Or it's a fake Little Samson, or any number of things, or it's just the worst possible condition Little Samson you've ever seen. I don't think they're going to have any recourse here, because taking a look at the terms and conditions of shopgoodwill.com, it says very clearly, as is, as pictured. So I don't think that any kind of condition or incorrect or missing components is going to be the grounds for them to have any, again, buyer's recourse. I consider that one hell of a gamble. If you really, really, really need a box copy of Little Samson and you're willing to pay price charting or close to it, go to your nearest convention and try and haggle them down to about price charting. You'd be surprised how much success you might find. These vendors look at a game like Little Samson is part eye candy for their boots, but also the kind of thing where they can sit there for years looking for someone to pay way over the average book value, particularly if the condition is average, or they can take the first person that comes along and gives them average value. So again, it's really strange to me to see this behavior. I was expecting that maybe an auction like this would end around the $3,000 mark, maybe $3,500, maybe $4,000. But even then, if someone bids up to $4,000, they are making the wager that they're willing to pay 80% of the price charting value for this lot with extremely low amounts of information involved. I don't know about you, but I don't have $5,000 laying around to put on the proverbial black on the roulette wheel of shopgoodwill.com. And this is where I'm really curious to see where you stand on this, because I imagine everyone watching this is going to have a bit of a different take and opinion on this. And I think I'd love to see the comment section here light up with exchange of ideas and opinions. Folks, as always, thank you so much for watching. If you like the cut of my jib, please consider hitting that subscribe button. I appreciate it. And as always, we'll see you next time on It's All Duggan Games.